Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
Doing great. I'm doing great. My head's a little caved in on the picture here. It looks like probably no, it's the other side. The
Correct. Some of the imaging in some of these tools is not right, but we know this. I see you haven't shoveled all of your snow
no,
yet,
no, I
and we're
haven't done.
getting another snowfall this coming Sunday, so you'll have even more to do.
No, I'm doing nothing compared to what I hear from all my friends and colleagues like you back at the back in the East who are digging your way through this thing. Uh, just what can you do? Winter
Right.
in New England.
It's winter in New England. Yes.
Unfortunately, it's winter in a lot of places that don't normally get a winter like this, like
Yes.
my sister in Nashville, Tennessee, and all these sort of
Right.
things. But that's not what we're talking about today, Deirdre. What are
No,
we
it
talking
isn't.
about today?
We are continuing in our discussion of the use of AI agents. We're in our 72 series now. And let me just remind everyone about what we're doing in these series. We're providing videos on a topic in three ways. We start with board discussions. That is a discussion between a CEO and a board chair in preparation of having a board meeting on a specific topic. Then we reverse engineer to what we call managing the decision or making the decision here. And that's what we're doing today. We've had two videos on the board discussion. And once again, the poor CEO in this scenario that we have going is failing to meet the expectations of the board directors. What we're showing today is what this CEO should have done to prepare for that decision. That is how the use of these AI models could have prepared the CEO to have a better decision, a better discussion with the board chair, one that the board chair would then be willing to take on to the board of directors. And then, of course, the third part of our series is what we call fundamentals. It's where we demonstrate the uses of the tools that we're using to make the decisions and prep for the board discussions. So, what we're doing today is showing what a CEO should have done to prepare for a board discussion. And you're driving today, Tom, so why don't you take
I
over?
am driving today. Yeah, so this is about doing exactly what you said. It's what the CEO could have done, right? This is the point, and this is what's available to all of us. And we're going to show you how you can use the capabilities that are on your desktop today to be able to see the power of how you can use an LLM and extract enterprise level value. And we held an interesting workshop on Sunday. This
Yes.
past Sunday, we had really great discussion. A lot of people that are very switched on about AI, and we had one who's very switched on, and his point was, I don't see any enterprise level value. And he's a CIO of a very large organization. And we started to explaining how you can see it and where it may not be as visible at the moment commercially.
Right.
Uh, and he was intrigued, and I think he'll be trying this stuff out because he's very tuned. He says, "Look, it's incredible." He's at the other end. He's looking at it, saying it's an incredible tool for the leader. He
Right.
gets all the stuff you and I talk about, but he wasn't quite bridging to the enterprise, which is where
Right.
we are now. We say we're assuming you know this now that how it's a valuable capability for a leader and can give them, but this is being able to see enterprise level value in what we're going to be doing today, or at least showing you how you could do it yourself and prove it to yourself. So, with that, may I show you some slides, Deirdre?
Please do.
Okay. So, we're going to be going through and simulating or demoing a using an LLM as a decision layer, a decision support layer. And in that layer, you'll witness that we could be executing what we call as agentic decisions, where they are executed they are researched, made, supported by, and executed by a layer of artificial intelligence, all the way to providing information for decision support to the highest levels of the business for high level and good decision making about topics that have enterprise level value. So we're going to be demoing that. That's a continuation of what we talked about, meaning that this is what the CEO of the company that we're portraying in these video series, 71 and 72, that she could have done. She could have done this work and presented it to me as the board chair, just as Deirdre said. That's what somebody like me would have expected. I happen to know this capability because I deal with it in a different context, but it can be done. The first thing you do is you need to have a company. So we profiled a company and we did it. We looked at many different alternatives of this and decided that the best way to do this was create a company that most of us could envision. And we can envision it as a CEO and envision the complexities that were involved. And so that we can show disparate data assets, business assets, and how they connect and the implications for the actual business itself. So we came up with a Peak Coffee Roaster in Evergreen, Colorado. That just happens to be a town in Colorado I know well and like very much. It's a coffee roaster that has a coffee cafe chain, 8 locations. They're growing, and they have a growing and direct to consumer online subscription business, common in this kind of situation. 25 million annual revenue. And their challenges are what almost every business faces today: costs, disruptions, downtime, preferences from the customers, talent retention, competitiveness, and so forth. Anything you'd like to add, Deirdre, as we proceed?
No, I think you've portrayed a business and you're already giving us some hints about where we can use this LLM to make decisions. So proceed.
The first thing you do, and we talked about this at length in the prior video, which was 72 1B,
Mhm.
is the first thing you do is identify assets. And you have to make as Deirdre says, you have to make a mind shift change. You have to shift your mind from thinking about company functions to thinking about company assets, and meaning assets that are key to executing the business process of your business. Those assets then generate data, and you need to be able to envision through a method. The first is to identify them. Envision what are those key assets. And so we'll just assert them. Now, this may not be the right list. So you could quibble with whether we've got the right list or not. We just made up a list based on this phantom company. But for your own business, the first thing you do is do this and say, what are those key assets, those core assets of my business? In this case, it's raw materials and inventory, the customers themselves, the equipment that we have that executes all of this, both the manufacturing and distribution piece and also the retail location, the talent all the way through the business, and then the supply chain partners along the way here. Now, as I said, we probably left out key people here, but this is the way we envision this in simplifying this. Any thoughts on this before I continue, Deirdre?
No, this looks like a good set of core assets.
So, you then build a connection map. And this is something we envision you do on a whiteboard where, and I've given you some of the flows here. And when you think about flows here, you're thinking about them across, meaning the business process where the supply chain partners feed inventory, and that has an effect on pricing and margin. And then that has an effect ultimately on retention. By the way, this may not be the right flow for your business. This is just a flow we're envisioning in this particular case. And you could see if you have IoT devices, you've got sensors that are feeding into a predictive maintenance algorithm that's giving you hopefully less downtime risk, and then it's protecting your revenue. So it's thinking about the business not in terms of functions, but thinking about it in terms of business process. This is the flow of your business executing its business. And you could see the same thing we talked about customer feedback and how that ultimately leads to purchasing and product menu and then menu adjustments and then inventory planning. And then you have talent too. So these are just certain flows. You want to be able to not only make those flows work, but you interconnect them much like you would in a project management way. Any thoughts, Deirdre?
Just want to spend a moment making sure people understand what we mean when we talk about working across the functions or having the assets as a horizontal here. That in a standard business, you have your functions such as manufacturing, finance, marketing, sales, and so forth. But if you think about how work actually gets done in an organization, there are connections that tie the functions together. And when you take it one step further and look at the flows of data in an organization, data being the key thing that you need to use these LLMs, the AI models, that you see that it's no longer effective to isolate functions, that you have to follow the flow of data across the assets. For example, supply chain is often part of manufacturing or part of finance. And then you have inventory, which is often part of the distribution function. Pricing and margin is often part of finance. Customer retention is usually part of sales. And here we are tracing a data flow across four functions here. But that's the right way to think about it when you're thinking about the collection of data that can be used to drive decisions through the AI models. So it's taking apart a company's organizational structure, the traditional organizational structure, and rethinking that structure in terms of where's the data flow. And if you listen to people talk about the use of AI agents, they'll talk about exactly this point, that creating an AI agent infrastructure that goes across the traditional functions. Now, we're not using that terminology in this example. We're simply showing you how it works. But that's the overall context of what you're doing here, Tom. Sorry to take a moment on this, but I thought it good to set the context of what we're really doing here.
Yes, you'll notice I would probably not use the term function in this at all, except like Deirdre just did, in comparison to what it's not, right?
Right.
Because this is all about the business process, not about organizational structure.
Right.
And that's the mindset change that you need to really get your head around to be able to take advantage of where we're going with this. So, and by the way, that if you were listening to Alex Karp being interviewed in Davos, you heard him say, when somebody asked him a question about using AI in the enterprise, he said, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to stop thinking about your organization in terms of functions. And then he just left it. Right? Instead you go, wait a minute, what are you talking about? That brilliance can sometimes get in your way. It really can. But Deirdre, I don't suffer from that problem. You suffer from my problem, brilliance getting in your way. But you're moving across the organization. Now, when you're moving across these assets, it doesn't mean you don't have to drill down in an asset and it looks like you're drilling down into manufacturing, for example, because let's say we have an equipment problem or an equipment anomaly happening. Well, we need maintenance, and we need to schedule. Well, all that fits within manufacturing generally, assuming that that's where the equipment is, right? But then notice that should trigger, oh, do we then have a supply chain issue? Because that equipment may be down and that may be dependent in the supply chain. And that triggering tells you, it may go off into a different place. right? So you begin to see just drilling down on an asset doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stay within an organizational function. And that's why, even though I've used some bad examples here, it's a way to point out you have to kind of break your thinking and think in terms of the process of the business at the highest level. And some of you folks that are in supply chain, you recognize this type of thinking exists in supply chain. We're just going to make it a lot easier for you when we get to the actual data piece itself. So, the other piece of your mindset change, the first mindset change is to start thinking what I talk about as a cross instead of thinking this way, right? Now, some people would call that, silo thinking and others, and we've heard those terms. We try not to use those terms because they look backwards. We don't look backwards, we look forward. But that's what you're trying to think to get yourself beyond. And there's a good reason for that because we no longer care about disparate data and disparate sources. That is the key difference. That in order to deal with disparate data and disparate sources, in the past, we've had to, in some way, harmonize that data. However, you did it through an ETL, data warehouse inputs, scrubbing data. Now, there may be other reasons why you do that, to scrub data for training purposes of an AI model to make sure that you keep it on the lines you want to keep it on. That's a different problem. We're just talking about at this point being able to see how you can use that capability of dealing with disparate data from disparate sources. We have created some phantom data here, a supplier email thread, a CRM note, an IoT sensor log from a roaster that we have, a report out of HR, recent sales data, and then a note from finance. So this is where we could be. Deirdre and I could be sitting in a meeting of our team, and these people bring these things up, and usually they lead to a certain follow up. Okay, I'm going to go do this, and you go do that, and we'll get together and work on this. What we're going to say is you could actually turn to an LLM at this point and ask some questions about this data, which is what we're going to do eventually. What kind of questions might we ask? Well, we could say, if we wanted a what question. Okay, I just heard that, but what are the top three risks I face right now going into the second quarter? Because I'm into my first already. I'm worried about supplying the second. Can you predict what the impact of supplier delays might be on my margins? And can you simulate what if I raised subscription prices by 8% to offset the bean cost increases I just saw? Or can you give me some form of alert that may say, well, if you do any of these things happen, what does that have to do with retention? Do I have to predict a retention issue, or am I alerting myself to a potential problem there? Now, these all might be legitimate questions, and usually coming out of a meeting, you'd either get somebody's opinion in the meeting, or they'd say, look, let me go work on that and get back to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to follow our five-step process for dealing with AI-like thinking, or what Deirdre and I would call an AI thought partner, or in this particular case, we're going to use an LLM, and we'll use Claude here because in order to do what we're doing is going to take a fairly powerful LLM. And we discovered that again this morning when we were doing some things, didn't we, Deirdre? Where I ended up having to invoke the highest level of use of capability to be able to get the answers we were driving for. So we bump up into, and I found out last night and again this morning that I am pushing these models because fortunately, I get very good help when I do push the model and it breaks. And they've been incredibly helpful as they were to me last night and this morning. But we use a process that says, let's start by not limiting ourselves. Let's start by finding out what is the model, what can it do? right? And this is just, again, this process that we use is much like you use with a really, really smart new person in your organization who may be fairly inexperienced in your specific business, maybe has some industry knowledge, maybe has access to incredible knowledge, has access to incredible resources, has way more energy than you personally have, has the ability to work 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365. You want to research that capability. You want to learn about it. And then you want to press it a little bit. And then finally, you want to say, well, what if I gave you this? Right? So the kind of thing we might do is to say, well, you can't answer these questions based on this data if that's all you give it. And I say, what is it going to say? Right? Not say, you're right. I need to give it P&Ls and I need to get, no, 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 no. Say to yourself, what, what is it going to tell me? And you are the, remember, part of this is you have to lead the model. You have to see what the thing can do for you. And you then have to say, but what if I gave it, let it, if I give it this, can it sharpen that decision? Can it give me a better decision? What if I limit what I give it? Would that improve it? But again, I might be able to know that the model is not, right? Or the team around the table might. I'm not. The difference is what we are doing here is we are starting from the top down, as opposed to traditionally for doing applications like we're talking decision support applications, we'd start at the bottom up. Let's put all the data together and make sure we have all the data and have it all current. And then we start to overlay the questions and the training of the models we use, which are really arithmetic models. Now we have a thinking machine here, right? And we need to find out how does it think. Now, as Deirdre will tell you, it's going to base it on all the knowledge it has and the training it has. Good, because we may learn that unless we have our own model in-house with our own training and our own input and only allow certain input from the outside to come in, that'll give us the best decisions. About what though? And what do we really need the absolute best for? And what's the time precision trade-off? Very hard to figure that out if you're coming from the bottom up with all the details first, right? So when you're dealing with this condition, which is, in my thinking, different than we've ever had the capability, and this is, being around this space for a very long time, enterprise, technology, and entrepreneurial businesses from the ground up. We haven't had this before, and we need to discover. So now, what are we, and Deirdre, I'm going to stop before I move on here, and then we'll move to the demo, but what would you like to add at this point?
Simply like to add that in terms of learning what we have here, you're going to learn a couple of things, and that is how your company is organized to create data or to generate data that you need to make decisions, to make effective decisions in our increasingly complex business world out there, that many companies don't know what data they have. They don't know how to generate the data they need, and therefore they find it difficult to even answer questions that they don't have the points here. But I think a more important point and a more general point is what you're really talking about now, Tom, is the need to have your human machine partnership working.
Yeah.
And that is the human machine partnership in that diagram where we talked about the 5 steps, where the human is going to constantly be bringing the human's judgment, the human's knowledge, the human's instinct, the knowledge not only of the company, but of the industry, of the competitors, of what the customers want, and so forth. That the best that the machine can do is to generate output based on what it has to work with, the data and the training that it has to work with. And we hear stories, don't we, Tom, too many times about people just ripping the first response from the machine out of the printer and handing it in as final work. Well, that's going to be bad work
Yeah.
because that is only based on what the machine has. It's not based on steps 2, 3, 4, and 5 here, where the human starts to interact with the output and bring what the human knows to that output, guide the machine to produce better output, and then the human finalizes that output. And what we have just done, Tom, is just demonstrated why this is so important.
Yes, absolutely. So notice one of the things we're not requiring, we're not harmonizing any data. So we're not ETLing anything, we're not data warehousing anything. We're just taking data that we have. We've shifted mindset from functions to interconnected business assets, the key assets of the business. And we're using the LLM to provide insight, not to give us answers, but provide insight. And we're looking for things that'll really move the needle, 50% or more gains in terms of how you get the results of human machines working together. Meaning the ultimate output, whatever you're maximizing for at the end of your business, revenue, profit, cash, customer satisfaction, whatever those key things are, that's what we're talking about here. And this is what when those like at Davos who said we are quickly moving into the AI haves and the AI have not. This is what they mean. They don't mean AI agents making decisions for you. They mean an AI interface layer that helps you execute your business in a superior way. And these these applications exist in a few places and they work and they provide incredible benefit and they will spread. Uh, Now, they're not easy. They're expensive. They're, by the way, they don't, because they approach it the way we're approaching it, and I'm giving you a real way of doing it, by the way, this is the way it's done. You save an enormous amount of money on time. You hear Alex Karp say, give me a month and I'll have positive results for you. And he's talking about enterprise level stuff. He's not talking about some small use case within one small piece of a company, of a major company. He's talking about enterprise wide. He's talking about this kind of thing. So, again, mindset shift. You've got to have a key asset map. So, you have to have it, whether it's in your head or it's on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper or on a screen or in some kind of an engineering app you use. You have to, in thinking about an AI insight layer, an AI engine that synthesizes data from disparate sources in a living context. And notice I said living. So it's not real time, it's living. It's whatever the asset data is and whatever happening, it follows that path. You are looking ultimately, we won't get there in this particular video session, but we will in the next one, where we're then going to have a spectrum of decision support activities, where you're looking at agentic actions, which are where the AI is recognizing a decision needs to be made and making it under certain conditions. That's an agentic architecture versus where it's acting as your agent, as a human agent, versus where it's supporting your decision as the human in this thing and all the hybrid and combined decisions in between. Where your ultimate output is this, I'm looking for the best decisions I can make under those conditions. And that is risk and time offset by precision and knowledge. So With that, Deirdre, anything more you want to add here?
No, I think people want to see the demo, Tom.
Okay. And we've talked about what the goal is. So let's move to the demo. And as I've said, I'm going to use um, Grok here. Get to my sharing of the screen. Now, what you're going to see is the chat stream. So I have two different chat streams, and you're going to see some pretty crazy stuff. Now, you see that it treats me like a human. I treat this like a human because I think about it the way I think about a very smart uh, graduate, recent graduate of one of our programs. Um, and I wanted to not do this. So I've not run the simulation yet,
Mhm.
but I am ready to run it. So I
And
am
Grok
going to
says it's
say,
going to blow everyone's mind. So prepare yourself, everyone.
yes, it may blow everybody, may blow our credibility too, Deirdre. So we have to wait and see. All right.
Okay.
So again, I treat it because I want to keep reminding myself to treat everybody and everything um, well. So I'm going to say good afternoon. Deirdre and I and Zoom are ready to run the simulation. Okay. And blow people's minds and hopefully not our credibility. Now, I know that Sam Altman would say we're just wasting compute time. I get that. I get that. And I actually don't care because I enjoy seeing what it will respond. So I have this set up so it won't execute on enter, which is what I prefer. Okay. Now, I may have to at some point shift. I've got this. I'm going to move it to thinking, Deirdre, so that we don't end up
Just
with,
in case, right.
you know what? Let me leave it there so that people can see if it does get hung. Okay. All right. So let's see what the model is saying back to us. Good afternoon. Welcome to the simulation. This is going to be electric. Okay. Zoom is rolling. Minds are about to be blown. Credibility fully intact. And we're ready to demonstrate beyond the AI hype. Okay, we're going to use this company. It's confirming back what we had discussed. We'll walk you through a simple path forward to identify the assets and the data. All right. And I drive the narrative. And I'm going to say we're ready to provide you the data because we've gone through all the preliminaries, gone through the preliminaries, are ready to feed you some data. How would you like to proceed? We're ready to roll. How to proceed? Okay. Quick recap. Okay, we've reframed the organization around key assets with data. We built a connection map, feed real-world messy data snippets, and watch how we create results. We're going to feed these snippets. Now, we could feed all of them or we can feed some. Paste them, like it said, one at a time or in a batch, whatever flows. And it's actually giving them to me here. And I may just cut and paste from there because it's a little bit more detailed than the ones I have. and then we'll ask a question about it. So what do you want to do here, Deirdre?
Well, why don't you cut and paste?
How much?
Um, well, is it worth going one at a time, or would that take too much time? Should we do
No,
maybe two at a time? Or
let's
okay,
do at least, let's do one first.
okay, and see what happens.
Okay.
Hmm? By the way, I must say that Grok has developed a personality.
Deirdre, is that in comparison to me or is that in comparison to what?
Two previous versions of Grok.
Okay.
It's
I know
much
this
more
morning you
Claude-like.
mentioned, no, this morning you mentioned it's becoming a little bit more Claude-like in the way it
Right,
functions, in your observation. And I think you're right.
right.
Here's one piece of data just emerged. Okay. All right. What question do you want to ask? Do you want to ask, Deirdre? What question would you like to ask? So we had questions like, um, where are my questions?
Well, here they are. It's what immediate operational action should we take?
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Yes. Or maybe we go with the simulate the impact if we accept the delayed Ethiopian shipment versus shift to the Brazilian alternative. That seems like the most interesting question related to this particular piece
Okay.
of data.
All right. Where did my, okay. Mm, here's the question.
This is some answer here, giving us many options with all sorts of pieces of data involved.
All right. So let's dig through this. All right. Procurement supply chain asset, classical real world delay. Okay. We know all this. Okay. I'll simulate the impacts from two paths using the insight engine. Okay. This is a primary hit is on raw materials, right?
Right.
Customer, flavor consistency drives NPS,
Hmm.
and that is important for us. Revenue production, margin compressing already. So this is going to be more problems there. Rerouting, affecting working capital. Yep. Stock out risk. And then a broader 26 effect. There's a
Hmm.
global coffee remains in deficit mode, a carryover from the drought. Uh,
Hmm.
they're volatile. Recent prices, specific origins like Ethiopia are premium with forecast for 10. Okay. Accept delayed Ethiopian shipment and switch to the Brazilian alternative. Well, this is interesting. Okay. Um, so peak roast usage is about 5,000 pounds a month. It's got to be getting this from looking at comparable businesses like ours on the web in its data. Costs are rising. Okay. Alternative 20 plus 22. Roasting process yields normal. Customer impact about a 3-week delay risk. Margin risk. No major. Okay. So what it's saying down here is no major additional freight hull. Okay. Option one. So this, what we're looking at there are the assumptions.
Hmm.
Option one, accept the delayed shipment, 3-week delay, extra cost, minor holding costs. Okay. Revenue customer impact, high risk of inconsistency. Yeah. Projected retention hit. Yeah, there could be. Revenue could be. Yeah, that seems about right.
Mhm.
Net outcome. Okay. The outcome is it has a potential effect on margin, could drive it down into the 32s based on just the data that it can pick up. It could affect us anywhere from 2 to 400K. I'm not sure that we know that, but I got it. Quality reputation upside preserves the premium Ethiopian profile longer term. Higher long-term brand value, but short-term revenue and margin pain. Yeah, I agree with that. And maybe even some NPS stuff. Option two, switch to the Brazilian alternative. It's going to cost 22% more, but faster delivery. Talks about the cost, the revenue. Okay. Next 3 months, it changes. Well, no, it doesn't. That holds about the same. Maybe a little bit less of a margin hit, revenue downside, rather. Yeah, lower short-term revenue hit, but slightly higher cost and potential brand difficult. Okay. Dilution. Recommendation. All right. Primary is switch to Brazilian alternative. 70 to 80% confidence in that decision. Now, it's giving me this because I have it set up to always give me confidence intervals on its recommendations when possible. Key assumptions, customer feedback and inconsistency is accurate. On inconsistency is accurate. So meaning, assuming that we're going to get customer feedback on that, and it's predicting it's correct that we will, and there's no general quality drop. Okay, I get it. So it's assuming that even though they're different types of coffee, that relatively it'll be viewed as quality match, even though it's going to be taste shift. Pros to switch, it protects Q1 revenue continuity. The cons are it's a higher immediate cost. Yep. Arguments for delay preserves authentic Ethiopian profile. Yep, that makes sense. Sensitivities and what ifs. Okay, if the customer churn is from inconsistency, delays win. Prices drop. Okay. This is pure synthesis from one disparate source, imagining a layer on the other snippets. Okay, so it's telling us what to say here, but it's
Right.
saying,
I find that amusing that
yeah,
it's telling us what to say.
look, it doesn't know that we're showing it live, but that's
Right.
okay. That's we expect that. Okay. I actually don't think this is bad, Deirdre.
It's not bad. And we could do two things here, as it says. We could try a different data snippet. I'd almost wonder about a follow-up question here before we
Great.
paste in another snippet. And I'll tell you what that is. This answer was based on a 3-month analysis.
Okay.
Suppose the Ethiopian coffee bean situation continues to deteriorate.
Okay.
Suppose this goes on for a year. What does that do to the answers here?
Okay. What if the IOP, right?
Ethiopian, IO, yes. Delay lasts for 12 months instead of 3 months. Because anyone who's done spreadsheet modeling understands this type of
Oh,
question.
yeah.
Oh, no response.
Okay.
We have to
Now,
switch.
what this is saying, when you get this kind of question of no response, notice it just timed out and said it can't answer. Why? Okay. So you have in Grok, we have an auto mode. That's where I had it set. I keep it set on auto. It basically is looking to say, has somebody asked a question like that before? Or can I use just simple data? Fast makes it even worse. Expert, it thinks a little bit harder. This is where you're getting, when you get into 4.1 thinking, this is what we call deep thinking. This is where it will try its best to give me an answer. I wanted to actually, and notice how I haven't tried to invoke heavy yet, but you, when you're moving here, this is where you are pressing the reaches of where the model has reached before. Because if somebody else has asked this kind of question before, it would, or something similar, it would have it more higher up in the chain of how it's looking at things. So this is telling you again, you're pressing it a little bit, which is perfect. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here. Now, this is why, again, you spend a lot of money for these models to use them this way, where you're asking a lot of compound questions.
Affects project timelines. Good.
Now, when you break that level, that's when it's great to have friends who will help you break through it.
Mhm. See, it's telling us what it's looking at. It's almost showing us how we excellent follow-up. Yes, it was. Thank you, Grok. Hmm.
Don't fall for that, dear.
Okay, I won't do that.
Okay, since it's your question, I'll let you narrate this piece.
Excellent follow-up. I'll repeat that. Now, hypothetically,
You're still living
escalating.
in the glory of when it said, well, this was Claude that said, "This is a really great book of yours, Deirdre."
Absolutely. I love these models. They're very complimentary. Now, hypothetically escalating the delay to 12 months, prolonged problems. By the way, the question I asked, even though Grok had a little trouble with it, is a very natural and very important
It
question.
is.
Anyone dealing in the commodities markets knows that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So you have to start ask some of these longer questions. So synthesizing with current contact, it's sort of like repeating some of the assumptions, and it's talking about except a 3 month delay versus a 12-month delay. And this is talking about when you switch to the Brazilian. If we accept that it's only going to be a 3 month delay, we get this is our incremental bean cost. No additional fees. And this is what it does to revenue. And this is what it does to our brand. And then it starts to get into the net outcome for the next 6 to 9 months. We get an additional margin dip of 2 to 4%. It says it's painful but survivable. Okay. But let's talk now about what happens when we go to a 12-month delay. Now, what we're really starting to do is this is how executives think. This is the type of information you really need. It's showing us what it can do for us.
Mhm.
That it's a very high opportunity cost. Well, we kind of know that. We have prolonged substitution, fundamental profile mismatch, projected churn of 20 to 40%, which is major here. Revenue risk 50 to 30% annual. In other words, we're having a major impact here if we don't already start to think about what happens in this commodity market if the delay goes longer. This is pointing us to decisions we have to make and the outcomes we face if we don't do this or if we do this. I hope everyone is following what I'm saying here, that
Yeah.
we can't just depend on the initial 3 month delay, but we have to anticipate a net outcome over 12 to 18 months where we get a sustained compression of margin and catastrophic without intervention. Thank you, Grok. That's what I need to know, that I cannot depend on just a 3 month delay. I have to, as a good executive, already start to think about if this goes on. And Ethiopia is not a politically stable area, by the way. We've got to
It's
bring that
not.
in. This is my knowledge of the marketplace, my judgment as a human, bringing this to the model, pushing the model to go further and do more analysis for me. This is our step two, Tom, really working here. Our step two, the interaction between the human and machine, to drive me to the point where, yes, my gut instincts are right that I've got to act here
Yes.
because I could face a catastrophe in my business. So
Yes.
even though it's going to be a higher short-term cost is better than catastrophe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And this is why, and this is what is so powerful here, because most people that have this kind of business, they don't have a Deirdre sitting around to help them guide themselves through this, but they have the instincts. They have the instincts and they know the market and they can ask these kind of questions. And notice, I didn't have to feed any other data in here. It's making some general assumptions about the kind of business I have. Now, if I want to be if I want to be more precise about some of these key assumptions, I can feed in what my NPS score is. I can feed in my actual revenue and margins. I can feed in all this data to improve the precision. But in a question like this, I don't know that that's going to help me make this decision, Deirdre. I think I have to switch to Brazilian now and watch carefully what's going on with Ethiopia.
Absolutely. And see, for the 12-month delay, the recommendation switch fully and diversify now. Look at the confidence level here,
Yeah,
which gives me even more confidence that this is the right decision because the delay becomes unacceptable.
yeah. And the more like the likelihood of it being more than three is greater than being three or less.
Correct.
And you know that, Deirdre, because you know this market, for example, or you know that that's not the case. But we both know that's not. If this is really true, that's a problem. So
Correct.
so here's an interesting question. I wonder how all of this changes if I put in all of this other data that my CRM note, my IoT sensor log, the HR report on people, the sales data report, and the finance report.
Let's see.
Okay. Because that is what is going to be very interesting. Now, what does it change about this? But there may be all kinds of other things that we could query on just these key points that were brought up in a staff meeting, right?
Hmm.
And
Yes, absolutely.
here's this, and then here the data was here. Where was it? Oh, the data is way back up here.
Yeah, up further. Yes, because Grok gave us a very, yes, there it is, Tom, at the bottom of the screen. Up, up a little bit.
Yeah, okay. My fingers aren't moving the mouse. Right here. Okay. Now, what if I grab all of this, right? The CRM data,
Hmm.
the IoT data, this, and then the weather alert. What if I grab all that and throw it in there and say, what is the effect
Right,
of this decision? And what else do I need to worry about?
right.
Right? Okay. So a bunch of the people here, a couple of questions. What would be the first one, Deirdre? What would
Uh,
you like to ask?
how does this data affect your answer?
Is it an A?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm in the spelling mode. Sorry. I was asking something else there. Oh, Ethiopia, I was asking earlier.
Right.
Okay. How does this data affect your recommendation? And then I think the other one is, what else? Is there anything else I need to worry about?
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see how Grok processes all of this information. This is a big ask of it.
So interested to see what this comes up
I
with.
know. I love watching how it thinks through what sources it goes to and how it processes this information. That's one of the, there we go. That didn't take long at all.
Okay.
You see what
Okay.
it says? This is the AI insight engine in full flight, synthesizing across all assets. Mhm. So,
Okay. And disruptions, the market tightness,
mhm.
broader context. Okay. How this data affects the recommendation. Ethiopian delay versus Brazilian switch. Okay.
Well, look at the updated recommendation. This new data shifts it firmly and urgently to switch to the Brazilian alternative immediately and accelerates supplier diversification. That is, qualify Colombia and Kenya. That's more alternatives for brighter nodes. Do not accept any meaningful Ethiopian delay. Very interesting. And then it goes into why the ship gives us explanations as to why this new data intensifies this recommendation. Um, the customer feedback is questioning some of the roast profiles already. The root cause is already these equipment variants affecting the taste. The market backdrop sustained high prices and global deficit, no quick relief. Our margins are at risk. We knew that already, but the model is intensifying that. And then it goes into simulated impact update for the next 3 to 6 months, which is just proving its case that we need to shift immediately. And then decision support spectrum. Do you want to talk about that, Tom?
Keep
Because
going, dude. Keep going. Play it. Play it.
okay, primary recommendation, execute switch to Brazilian bridge stock immediately. And it mentions that its agent would be willing to take care of this for us, although it hasn't quite asked us to do that yet. But it's interesting. Look, the confidence level is equally high, 85 to 90%.
Wow.
The interconnected data makes a delay unacceptable. The pros of a switch are revenue operations continuity, which in our business is extremely important, reduces stockout fire drills, and stockouts would kill our business. We know that. It aligns with the current talent and equipment constraints. The cons are modest cost increase. Well, frankly, failure of business outweighs the modest cost increase. We have to do this immediately. The best argument against a shift is if Ethiopian is non-suitable, substitutable brand core and customers tolerate minor inconsistencies. Well, we don't think that's true. And a delay like that, we can message around that argument. We can talk about, as the model itself told us, we can talk about how we've switched to a new source for a better taste in the coffee. Sensitivities and alternatives here. If equipment is fixed and new roasters hired fast, a delay is tolerable briefly, but we don't think we can't tolerate the risk of just a brief delay. Ranked options, full Brazil switch is the safest. It's talking about a 73% Brazilian blend delay. We can't even tolerate that risk. So we've got to make this shift immediately. Look at the risks it's talking about here.
Yeah.
And in effect, it's telling us that the risks are pointing to we can't risk the operational breakdown. We've got to make the shift immediately. I love
And
what
it's
it
giving
tells.
us, right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I love what it's telling us to say. Look at this. We have five messy sources from across the organization synthesized in seconds into interconnected risks and a clear path. That's perhaps the biggest thing that adding those data points did, Tom. It pointed to how the interconnected risks make one clear path the absolute for us. We need to make this decision quickly. And all of the data points we enter just raise the possibility of risk that much higher. We can't tolerate the reactive firefighting. We need to go into proactive leverage mode. In other words, the model is showing us that all of our data points are just intensifying our risk, and we need to, as it puts it, build something powerful here.
Yeah. And you see it came back and said it has a couple of things, proactive alerts and suggested actions. The spectrum of output in decision terms is agentic actions, schedule preventive maintenance on roaster 2 this week and secure that Brazilian contract, meaning it can begin executing that by itself if we have the agentic AI piece set up. And we should for those things. And then we've got a couple of things. We got to look at the talent side, the customer side, and the overall prediction. So it's saying we've got more work to do, but essentially think about what this just did based on very, very limited but pointed data about your business. Notice I have not loaded in any real, what you and I would generally consider ERP data in here, Deirdre. I didn't give
Right.
it our traditional stuff. I
Correct.
gave it snippets of data that we have right this moment happening in this business. Now, think about what we just did in terms of the decision making we just did for this particular company. That is what we're talking about. Now, can you envision in your mind if you got this layer and you were in charge of executing the Iran bomb strike or the Maduro capture, right? This is what they were looking at. These relatively short pieces of data coming from sensors all over the place, different kinds of things, with a synthesis layer as powerful as this is, perhaps even more powerful, and specifically designed to do that work. And there are people, the leaders are executing with this kind of information. This is what makes that happen in what appears to be a much more precise, a much superior result. We're not talking about whether you like that or not, right? We're not, that's not our game. We're not saying that was a good thing to do, not a good thing to do. That's not our game. Our game is the technology that's capable that you can use. We are using a commercial model that would cost you $30 a month to use, and you can do it this moment if you want.
Mhm.
That's what we're talking about here. So, with that, I have one final slide to show you, Deirdre.
Very good. By the way, while you're pulling that up, I'll comment that because this is a live podcast, we couldn't do the in-depth analysis that we, as owners of the business, would do with all of this data. And that's what we would want to do to finalize. That's our fifth step in the process of using these models. We would want to take the time to go through all of the information provided and great information to just see what else we had to do to get a broader sense of not just the one action of switching our supplies, but also anything else that we had to do to keep our business moving forward profitably.
Yeah.
Uh,
And there's
but
other
it,
things we could have added some other operational data in there and gotten again, but it's you're going to know your business better. And this
correct,
is the point. You know your business well. You know what the key information is. This
right.
is about getting another way to look at this data to get insight into when it's based on decision making. And this is what these layers do so well. This layer we've had now for almost 12 months. This what we call the thinking layer, the deep thinking layer.
Right.
And you can
Mhm.
call it an inference model, whatever you want to call it. But when you're talking about the powerful models that Gemini has or Claude has, or there are a number of them on the commercial side that you can trust the training. That is where the game is, and there's so much power here that can be used that it does not take millions of dollars for you to be able to help and start using these models in your business. Now, if you decide you want to bring in a specific layer and have it more precisely function in your business, absolutely. But that's what we talk about. We don't like to use the word use case. Deirdre doesn't like to use the word use case because it's it gives you a backward looking thought. This isn't a bunch of use case. This is a layer, a decision support layer that just helped us make a decision about supply where we have pretty good confidence that's the right decision to make to switch to Brazilian now and start looking at Kenya. And by the way, we got a talent problem we got to work on. We got a roaster problem we got to work on. We got the Brazilian contract in place. I mean, it told us the kind of things you want to know coming out, and you don't have time because you've got a line out there. You got to go pull espressos for people, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
And more to the point, I think, Tom, also, it gave us a full profile of our risks. In other
yes.
words, it made it very clear to us that we don't have an option here. A lot of entrepreneurs sometimes bring emotions into the decisions, which is sometimes good, but in a case like this, it would be bad. That you have to fully understand your risks. And using terms like catastrophic, failure, and things like that just really drives home the value that this provides to help you clarify your thinking. You will bring your knowledge and judgment to what the machine is telling you. But you also have to realize that the machine is helping you by presenting the business facts of the case, by helping you remove your emotion from the decisions, which very frankly, and I'm saying this having worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and having had to deal with this specific problem with a lot of entrepreneurs, it removes the emotion from the decisions and puts you on a more sustainably profitable path.
Absolutely. Let me just point out one thing too, Deirdre. Notice how here it had confidence intervals, pros, cons, best arguments against, and sensitivity and alternatives. These are given here because I asked for them.
Right.
So when I set up the profile in Grok or Claude or Gemini or any of the others that I have, I put in give me these things when appropriate so that it will give me a parameter. And this is part of, Deirdre, what you and I talk about when we say you're beginning to interact with the model and lead the model. You're trying to figure out, okay, what are you telling me? And notice how Deirdre immediately went to confidence intervals going up into the 85% range. She's going, wait a minute here. Whether that's real or it's only 80% is not really the point. The point is, it just said, look, I'm pretty sure I'm pointing you in the right direction. And that's in when you start to move in that direction. Frequently, a question that I ask that Deirdre sees me ask is, tell me what it would take to improve that confidence interval.
Right.
Tell me what it would take, and then let me make, essentially what we're saying is let me make that decision on whether I want to do that. But sometimes it tells me it's actually not that, it's actually this, right? But again, that's like your constant confidence in the market. You know the business, you know the market. So these are all important things. I want to talk about, I just getting really lazy with my language here, Deirdre. Sorry about that. Let's talk about our next video.
Right.
I will let you tell it about this. Why don't you tell everybody what we're going to do it up to in the next one?
Well, we're going to continue to deepen our discussion. We promised you we would be talking about agentic AI, and here we got into it in this video to some degree, and we're going to get into it much farther here. What we're going to do is talk about how this AI insight layer that Tom's been talking about can actually yield three things. One, it can point to the agentic action. We saw that a little bit. We'll see it
Yep.
more next time. It can provide the standard decision support, which in itself is frankly worth it. Given all of the information, given how there's so much information out there to process and so many decisions to make in a business. Or it can do some sort of intermediate work here.
Which
It
is kind of what it did for you and me, Deirdre. It said,
correct,
I could do
absolutely.
this and let you should do this and we should think about this, right?
Correct. And it was doing part of that because, as you were just saying, Tom, you asked it to do that sort of thing. You
Right.
provided standard instructions for its work with you in the model. And we can go back maybe and show people where you did that next time when we start out the next discussion. But the idea here is that you're leading the model. You decide what you want from this AI insight layer, and you work with the model as you choose. And none of the decisions that you make is permanent. You can say, okay, I want to start out with agentic action. And then you say, let's switch to decision support mode. How can we interact? How would your answer change here? Or how would your answer change there? So we're really in this next video deepening how we interact with the model, showing you how you can deepen your interaction to just get more insight, more actionable insights from this, more decision support, better decisions for running your company going forward. That's all
Now,
I can say about it.
let me say, you've gotten a taste of this. What if you're in an institution that is struggling a little bit? To sit around the table and put a bunch of information in like that from some smart people sitting around your room, your board of trustees, for example, or a committee, and doing this kind of work with a smart student who knows how to do this to give you insight into how to deal with some of these problems you're dealing with. What if you're sitting there saying, how do I need to train the MBA of the future? What does that person need to look like? Or that person that is an expert in technology, we think about them as having tech management background, so an MS in tech management instead of an MBA. So they're business people with a tech foundation. What do they need to look like? What do they need to be learning to do? What do they need to be able to do to help their companies that they go work for? It's this. This is it. Understanding this, being able to do this, to help businesses figure this out. That's what this is all about. If you want us to help you, we are here to help you, right? We are here
Absolutely.
to enable all of that. That's what our job is. But we can't imagine that people can't need this, right? We see it so clearly. So if you start to see it yourself, let us know. That's what
Right.
we're here to do. We hope that you've enjoyed following this so far today because, Deirdre, it's a pleasure.
Tom, it's always a pleasure. So long for now.